cat poems, sea vampires, owl training, the writer's life. Thank you to Dara Lynn and everybody from Wordcrafters for asking me to talk tonight. So I had just started high school when I had my first short story published in a magazine that went to students all over the United States. It was one of those scholastic magazines that you get. Do you still get those in school? They're kind of thin paper, everybody gets one. Well, my English teacher gave each of us a copy and then read my story out loud to everybody. It was the story of something that had happened to many of us in the 5th grade. We had a substitute teacher, and we were very, very bad. We were very naughty. And we made her cry. She sat down on a stool in front of us and told us that she had just had cancer surgery. And then she made us cry. Later on, I would work as a substitute teacher as an adult and find out that karma comes back to bite you in the butt. But right then, I put the experience into a short story, sent it off to Scholastic Magazine because there was a little blurb in the magazine that said, "Send me your stories," and they published it, and they sent me a $50 check. I should have been dancing for joy, but I can't dance, and I had forgotten something really important. I'd forgotten to change my classmates' names. So there we are, sitting in freshman English class, and the teacher's reading the story, and David Rhodes, the blonde bad boy surfer that I was seriously crushing on, is glaring at me across the classroom like, "You just put my name in a story for the entire nation to read, and I don't look good." Needless to say, we did not date. I learned a valuable lesson that day. What do you think it was? Anyone? No, it was actually to start writing cat poetry. So, while other girls were reading magazines about fashion and things like that, I had a subscription to Cat Fancy. Some of you know what that is. Now it's called Catster, and it still has 40 beautiful pages a month of articles about cats and full-color cat photos. There's also like a pull-out cat of the month. It's really bizarre. But there was always a contributors page for cat stories and poetry from us. You know, just regular people who love cats. So I sent them a batch of rhyming cat poems, and they published 2 of them. And they paid me $10 a poem. I was on my way as a professional writer. You might think, wow, Melissa had a lot of gumption for somebody pretty young. How could she just write something and boldly send it off into the world to have it published for fame and a little bit of fortune? What I had was a mother who believed in me. She's a writer herself, and when I was growing up, she had her little office in the garage, and it looked so romantic. She would turn on the electric typewriter, and it would hum. The electric typewriter, by the way, is a seriously awesome piece of equipment that does not let you waste time downloading cat videos. I would recommend it. I just thought it looked so interesting. So, when she saw that I was interested in writing, she gave me a book. It was the Writer's Market, I won't tell you what year. Thing weighs more than my dog, and it's full of information. I swiped this, by the way, from the bookshelf. Full of information on magazines and newspapers across the country that wanted to publish me. And they want to publish you. I kid you not. For instance, did you know that we have a local magazine for kids called Skipping Stones, and that they are constantly on the lookout for stories, poems, art, essays, and photographs from people about 25 years and younger, all the way down to like age 4. And you can go work in the office helping to make the magazine. The editor, Arun Tokay, is the loveliest man. You walk in, he makes you tea. He asks you, what do you want to write for us? What do you want to do for us? Welcome. We have that right here. We also have magazines like Kazoo. Have you heard of this? It's new. It's about 2 years old. We have magazines like New Moon for Girls and other magazines that specifically look for writing from children and young adults. So, my mother taught me how to use that big old book to find editors who might be interested in my writing. She taught me to sit down at her electric typewriter and work on a story or poem until it was as perfect as I could get it. And then in high school, after I'd outed that bad boy surfer crush in a short story, she got me a job as a reporter for a newspaper in Los Angeles, a newspaper for retired people. It was called Senior World, and it was all about the cool stuff that people did when they didn't have to work anymore. So picture this. I'm 17 years old, living in Los Angeles. It's about as different from Eugene, Oregon as you can get. There's an ocean somewhere close, but it's smoggy. And there are so many more buildings than trees. The streets are clogged with cars and buses. I am the only 17-year-old in the entire city without a car. So I am riding on my blue Schwinn Cruiser on the shoulder of a busy road to get to my first interview. There are no bike lanes, and here is the worst part. I am not wearing a helmet. Because back when I was a kid, parents didn't really think about helmets or brain injuries or anything like that. You just got on your bike and prayed and started pedaling. So there I am, riding in Los Angeles, rode my bike to my very first interview with an elderly woman who used to be a Ziegfeld dancer in the Ziegfeld Follies. For those of you who don't know, those were women who wore the big flowered headdresses and the very small little dresses, skirts, and they would dance in gorgeous formation, and they would do high kicks. And I'm sitting at this lovely older woman's table, and she's serving me tea, and I throw down my big tape recorder, and I stammer out my first question. "You still look very fit," I said nervously. "What's your exercise regimen?" She leapt out of her chair and snapped, "Of course I'm still fit." Then she proceeded to just pull down the waistband of her elastic pants and said, "Feel my butt." Excuse me, I said. "It's still as firm as when I was 20, she said, and then again, "Feel my butt." Well, I just about died. I'd been taught to respect my elders, not go around accosting their derrieres. But I had to get this interview for the newspaper. So I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and gave it a tiny poke. "Very firm," I told her. My point in telling you this is that writers have to be open to new experiences, right? We cannot let anybody tell us that we are not good enough to get published. And we have to be willing to ride our bikes across the city to get a good story. But for God's sake, people wear a helmet. After that first interview, I did another with a retired man who spent weeks making what he called his sea vampire costume. He's an elderly man who sort of created this costume of black and dark green, and it looked like kelp. He thought it was fun to put it on and get into the ocean and then climb out and scare the bejesus out of the little kids. You just never know where writing is going to take you. Where it took me was a young writers' camp up in the mountains above Los Angeles. My English teacher told me about it, and they got me a scholarship. The camp was 3 days of writing and reading out loud and playing games with high school writers all over the city. There, I found my people, including a boy who was way cuter than David Rhodes. Your people are here in this room. You can find them at Wordcrafters summer camps for young writers. You can find them at the library kids and teen section. It is rocking there if you haven't been there lately. You can find them at Skipping Stones magazine's office. You can find them at Ophelia's place during Camp National Novel Writing Month in July. Come see me for details. and of course in your yearbook, go yearbook, newspaper and creative writing classes at school. You got to find your people, and you got to find something else. You have to find solitude. Solitude. During that young writers camp up in the mountains in Los Angeles, it started to snow one day. Everybody rushed inside for hot chocolate and to play games. Snow was so new to me. I stayed outside. I sat in the ground. I didn't care if my butt got wet. And the snow was falling down, and I had my spiral-bound notebook and my pen, and I wrote for an hour. Because ultimately, that's what being a writer asks you to do, right? It asks you, in the midst of all that distraction of friends and phones and homework and movies and music and cat videos, you have to be bold enough to sit by yourself in the snow, or metaphorically so, and create stories and poems and screenplays, etc., by yourself. That's what I learned to do when I was still in high school. And this is what I still do today. I kiss my husband over there and our 5th grade daughter goodbye in the mornings, pet the cats a couple times, throw something for the terrier to fetch, and then I go into my writing studio in my sheep pajamas, don't let that leave the store, and work for hours and hours. A book takes a long time to write. Avenging the Owl took a year for the first draft and then about 4 other drafts on top of that. But it actually took a lot longer than that. I got the idea for the book, the story of 14-year-old Solo Han, who is forced to take care, oh, you got it, who's forced to take care of injured and orphaned birds of prey at a raptor rehabilitation center while volunteering with my husband at the Cascades Raptor Center below Spencer Butte. Raise your hand if you've been there. Oh, yeah, definitely. Do you know the snowy owl? My favorite, Archimedes. So we volunteered there for years, learning about birds of prey and how to care for them. I studied the owls in particular. I'm just a walking cliche because they're so much like cats, right? Eventually, I learned to train owls to sit on my wrist, this wrist, and stay still and calm for educational presentations. I didn't know then that I was doing research for a novel. I just liked the work and immersed myself in it. There is an important lesson here. As a writer, you can spend time boldly immersed in weird stuff, the weirdest stuff you can think of. In college, I had a job dressing up in a full-length snowman costume, entertaining rich kids at Christmas parties. Later, I volunteered as the raccoon for Nearby Nature. Maybe some of you recognize the voice. But I was allergic to the foam in the nose, so I had to retire. At the Raptor Center, I learned to feed baby owls that were going to go off into the wild while wearing, I kid you not, a bed sheet with holes cut out for the eyes so the babies wouldn't see that food was coming from humans and imprint on us. It was weird, yeah, but again, research. One year while we were there was a boy from South Eugene, IHS. Do they still have a volunteer requirement? You have to volunteer? Well, he left his to the last minute, and boy was he mad, because the only volunteer position left was at the Raptor Center, and he hated birds. He comes in the first day, stomping in, I don't want to be here and I hate birds. And I'm thinking, there's a story here. And there was. The story was he was afraid of them. And if you know raptors, I mean, a bald eagle, without meaning to, can break a human person's a wrist just by perching. So, yeah, he was right to be a little scared. Over the few months that he was there, though, doing his volunteer shift, he went from cringing every time he had to put a mouse in an owl cage to really developing a relationship with the resident crow and raven. Remember them? They're not raptors, by the way, but that's a different story. He began to take an interest in the birds of prey as well. He became so impassioned by helping these birds that he returned the next summer to volunteer after he had graduated and gone on to college. His story inspired me to write Avenging the Owl, which is indeed an OBOB book for next year. I took his experience and I turned it into fiction, a lot, and I gave him a friend, Solohan, based on my little brother. My brother, Mark, is a man with Down syndrome, but growing up to me, he was just my little brother. He was annoying, he was hilarious, and sometimes he was my best friend. I wanted to show readers that they don't have to stay away from kids who have a disability. That in fact, a boy with Down syndrome, like Eric in Avenging the Owl, or my brother Mark, is fascinating, full of unusual perspectives on life with so much to offer. Writers have so much power to make the world a better place. Through fiction and nonfiction, poetry, plays, all of it, we can inspire people to be kinder to those who aren't like them. We can get them to think in new ways about things like why it's important to protect the lives of owls and kids with disabilities and LGBTQIA people, I got it, and black people and brown people and immigrants and kids who might look different from you, who all have the same basic hopes and fears and desires. I'll leave you with a recap of the things that I've learned over the years as a writer. Number one, find an adult who believes in you as a writer. Learn all you can from that adult. My mother's been taken, by the way. Find your people. Number two, find your people, the ones who don't think you're weird, or they think you're weird and they love you because of it. Number three, learn to like solitude. Learn to turn off your phone, turn off your computer, step away from the cat videos, and write. I don't know where I am. Number four, research. The whole world is open to you as a writer. You can immerse yourself in anything you want, and it's not a waste of time because it's all material. It's about to be summer. What crazy thing are you going to do in the service of writing? And finally, use your power for good. Yesterday, I'm starting an OBOB team, and I met with a Springfield librarian who's helping me. And she said that when Avenging the Owl came out, she gave it to her friend who had a son with Down syndrome. And that friend liked the characterization of Eric so much that she gave it to her friends. You never know who is going to read your work, how it can change people's minds and create kindness and compassion in the world. So writers, use your power for good and wear a bike helmet. Thank you.